Welcome to today's Explainer. We are going to dive deep into the real story of how slavery legally ended in the United States and the incredibly complex challenges that immediately followed. We're looking at a massive, pivotal moment in history, the shift from bondage to constitutional freedom. And this isn't just about dates and dusty documents, it's about a fundamental tectonic shift in the very fabric of a nation. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll be looking at freedom becomes the law, proclamation versus amendment, the power to enforce, the exception clause loophole, the reality of sharecropping, and finally, education, morality, and peace. Section 1. Freedom becomes the law. To really grasp this historical moment, the HeroesMart Academy's source material grounds the history in its profound moral stakes. They point us to Galatians 5:1. It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. From this perspective, abolition wasn't just some savvy political maneuvering. It was a deeply moral imperative to recognize the inherent liberty of all people. So, when we get to December 1865, this amendment didn't just casually suggest freedom, it explicitly, undeniably abolished slavery everywhere in the country. It declared that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. This was a sweeping constitutional rule making freedom the ultimate law of the land. Section 2. Proclamation versus Amendment. Now, you might be wondering, why wasn't the Emancipation Proclamation enough to end slavery? I want you to think about this, because we always hear about the proclamation as this huge turning point, right? But ending slavery required much more than just a presidential decree, because from a legal standpoint, it had some major limitations. Think of it like this. The Emancipation Proclamation was essentially a temporary wartime measure. It was strictly limited to rebel areas, and it entirely depended on the Union military's power to actually be enforced. The 13th Amendment, on the other hand, was permanent. It applied to the entire country during times of peace and war, firmly closing the legal loopholes that previously allowed the institution of slavery to survive. Section 3. The power to enforce. Because let's be honest, just writing freedom on a piece of paper isn't going to cut it. You need the actual authority to act when that freedom is threatened. The amendment specifically states that Congress shall have power to enforce it. But what does that actually look like in the real world? Well, this enforcement clause was an absolute game changer. It gave lawmakers the direct power to pass additional protective laws. It meant they could create anti-peonage laws to literally stop new forms of coerced labor right in their tracks. Ultimately, the specific enforcement power provided the constitutional foundation for all future civil rights legislation. It was undeniable proof that the nation could amend its highest law to actively expand and fiercely protect liberty. Section 4. The exception clause loophole. But history is rarely simple, is it? Our narrative takes a bit of a dark turn here, because this specific clause became a major loophole. The amendment stated that slavery and involuntary servitude could not exist except as punishment for a crime. And well, some southern states immediately exploited this. They misused criminal laws, specifically by passing really broad vagrancy laws, and utilized convict leasing to force labor and continue to control the population. It's a stark reminder that while legal slavery ended, the fight for true freedom was far from over. Section 5. The reality of sharecropping. In the immediate aftermath, newly freed families have these beautiful, urgent goals: reuniting with family members who had been sold away, pursuing land to call their own, and eagerly seeking out education. But the economic reality they walked into was incredibly harsh. The sudden shift from enslaved labor to a free market didn't magically come with the resources they needed to actually thrive. Because legal slavery ended, but economic resources were so incredibly scarce, a lot of folks entered into sharecropping contracts just to survive. We can define this as a system of renting land for a portion of the harvest. Now, on the surface, sure, it offered a degree of autonomy that slavery never did. But the reality was often much, much darker. Let's break down exactly how this became a trap. Step 1. Families rented the land to farm. Step 2. They paid the landowner with a share of their crop. But step 3, without fair economic opportunity, without fair pricing, or the ability to own the land outright, they were systematically locked into a continuous, endless cycle of debt. It's a powerful historical lesson that really hits the nail on the head. True freedom requires much more than just legal abolition. It desperately requires economic opportunity as well. Section 6. Education, Morality, and Peace. Let's pull back and look at what this means for us today. The HeroesMart Academy series synthesizes this history into a really compelling modern lesson. They argue that just as smart legal frameworks failed without moral application in the South, where legal loopholes were exploited to continue oppression, having a great education today is actually harmful if you lack biblical morality. The curriculum asks a tough question. What is the point of being smart and highly educated if you just continue to make bad choices that cause pain to yourself and others? Education intertwined with morality is absolutely essential. Drawing directly on Romans 8:6-7, which promises life and peace to everyone who keeps their mind spiritual, the curriculum emphasizes that true learning is about way more than just soaking up facts. The source material argues that aligning your mind and your education with a moral spirit is what actually fosters life and peace, rather than destruction. So, I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought from the series. As you become highly educated and learn all about the triumphs and the loopholes of history, how will you ensure your moral compass guides you? How are you going to use your knowledge to make good choices, avoid hurting others, and find true peace and liberty in your own life? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep seeking knowledge and keep that moral compass pointed true.